It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Perez coming to you from Baltimore. On Thursday, Venezuela's National Electoral Council finally announced the date during which the opposition may collect signatures for a recall petition on President Nicolas Maduro. The dates will be October 26th, 27th, and 28th, during which time at least 20% of the registered voters have to sign the petition. If that process is successful, the Electoral Council says the referendum itself will take place sometime in February of 2017. Leaders of Venezuela's opposition coalition, the United Democratic Roundtable, expressed anger and dismay at the announcement because this means that if President Maduro is recalled, he will be replaced by vice president for the last 2 years of his presidential term. If Maduro were recalled before January 10th, a new presidential election will be held, and the opposition would have a chance at getting one of their candidates to become president. Joining us from Caracas to talk about all of this is Jeanette Charles. Jeanette works with English language media outlet VenezuelaAnalysis.com and is currently a student at the Bolivarian University of Venezuela in Caracas. She also works with the U.S.-based Latin American Solidarity Organization, Witness for Peace. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeanette.
Thank you so much for having me again, Sharmini.
So, Jeanette, leaders of the opposition are no doubt angry about all of this. How do you think they're going to react?
Well, I think after this week's announcement, some of the things that have come out just in today's and the last couple of days, newspapers have been some of the official statements that the MOOD, or the opposition bloc, as well as the PSUV, or the Socialist Party bloc, have responded with. One of the ways in which the MOOD has responded has saying that they consider the CNE's, or the Electoral Council's, declaration a violation of the Constitution. And they, quote, warned that there would be massive, energetic, nationwide protests. On Monday, they've organized some sort of gathering where they're going to be placing together a roadmap so that their supporters know what actions to take next.
Jeanette, this is one thing that the Constitution of Venezuela clearly spells out in terms of rules and regulations regarding recall referendums. Is this a violation of the Constitution?
No, it's clearly not. And actually what's been really interesting is some of the conversations I've had with grassroots movement leaders is that the opposition historically has rejected the recall referendum. So during the 1999 Constitutional Assembly process, leaders such as Ramos Alup, who's now the opposition head of the National Assembly, opposed having the recall referendum included in the Constitution because it essentially provides an opportunity for the people to directly hold their elected officials accountable.
Right. So let's get a little bit into how the OAS and the U.S. State Department is responding to all of this. They have already weighed in, saying that the recall process should be held right away, siding with the opposition here. Where is the OAS at with this?
Like you said, the OAS and the U.S. State Department have issued their statements saying that they would like the recall referendum to happen this year, though even in our last interview, we talked a little bit about how that's logistically impossible. And Jorge Rodriguez, who is part of the United Socialist Party Commission for verifying the signatures, even talked about how that won't happen. I mean, one of the things in which that most media have not covered is that the opposition has presented, the 1% of signatures with many irregularities and fraud. And there are a lot of numbers that point to that. The CNE certified, and I'm looking here at my notes because I can't remember all the numbers, but these were published today in the Correo de Orinoco, which is a newspaper here in Venezuela, but that 10,995 dead people signed the first round of the support for the referendum. There was one person who was apparently born in 1898. 9,333 people with unofficial ID numbers signed, and 3,000 were underage voters. And out of the 1.3 million signatures that were presented for the first phase of the recall referendum, more than 800,000 people did not verify their signatures, which is very uncommon in Venezuela, where electoral processes have very much determined one of the main access points for people's democratic participation.
Now, Jeanette, why cannot the referendum be held prior to this date? After all, the opposition had called for it back in May of this year.
The official timeline for the opposition to have had the recall referendum organized by this year would have been turning in the 1% electoral votes, I think, sometime in the first quarter of this year. So May is way beyond the first quarter. It's halfway through the second quarter of the year and makes it unfeasible according to constitutional guidelines.
Right. And now, a few weeks ago, there were very peaceful demonstrations on the part of the opposition, as well as those who are supporting President Maduro, the Chavistas. And there were huge protests, and they were fairly peaceful. And now the opposition is calling for more demonstrations to resist this decision on the part of the CNE. Do you think that will have an impact, and will they be as large, and will it fuel the opposition side here?
I mean, I think most people are hoping that the protests remain largely peaceful. I think there is definitely a history that proves that the opposition has gone towards violent tactics to make a point and try to get to what they want. I think, however, the general sense that I get just being here in Venezuela is that most Venezuelans are just they're betting on and hoping for the legality to function. So, making sure that the constitutional articles are upheld, making sure that the institutions are functioning. And I think most folks are pointing towards the CNE as a compass for this process and not trying to engage in violent activities.
Right. And if the opposition is successful in collecting the 20% of the signatures and the recall referendum is held and President Maduro fails to win that election, who will take his place, and what do we know about the current vice president?
Yeah, so just to be clear, too, is one of the things that the CNE also included, not just that it's 20% nationwide, but also 20% state by state. So there are 23 states in Venezuela, and if it's 20% just nationwide, it's 4 million votes. If it's state by state, that means that they have to reach a considerably higher number, which most folks point to being very unlikely. In the event that an election process does happen, the election would have to the opposition would have to win more than 7.5 million votes, which was what Maduro won with in 2013 in his presidential election. The current vice president is Aristobal Isturiz. He was the former governor of Anzoátegui and has a history of political credentials that makes him more than qualified to take on the presidency. But I think it's more unlikely that would happen. But if it were to happen, he definitely has a history within not just the Socialist Party bloc, but then also with the popular movement in terms of upholding the Bolivarian process and prioritizing social programs, social services, and equity and inclusion, which has been probably at the forefront of this historic process in Venezuela.
Jeanette, I thank you so much for joining us. And as usual, you were very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charmini. Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.